You pull from your experience, absolutely. And then you're adjusting for things like inflation, scope, size, level of finish. And you can tell them that. As long as you're giving them enough to understand the investment overall. And you're not putting in the full work. Stop overworking and over-delivering when you don't have the job yet.
All right. I'm Rebecca Hay, and I've built a successful interior design business by trial and error, podcasts, online courses, and so many freaking books. Over the last decade, I've grown from an insecure student to having false starts to careers, and now I'm finally in the place where I want to be. Throughout my journey, it's been pretty obvious that I'm passionate about business and helping other entrepreneurs do the same. Each week, I'll share tangible takeaways from my own experience and the experiences of other badass women to help you build your confidence and change your business.
Hey, it's Rebecca, and you are listening to Resilient by Design. Today, I want to talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough once you're past that early stage of business, and that is why your project budget still might feel off. Not completely wrong, not wildly inaccurate, but inconsistent, uncomfortable, right? And sometimes hard to stand behind with full confidence. You've done enough projects to have some experience, but things still are not fully dialed in. And that's what we're going to clean up today. So let's talk about why your project budgets still feel hard. So here's the real gap. You have likely reached a point in your business where you are no longer guessing. Hallelujah, right? However, you're also maybe not feeling anchored, solid. And you're pulling from past projects, recent installations, conversations with contractors and different vendors, and you're trying to piece together a number that feels right. You always get maybe a little bit nervous before you present your budget to your clients. Sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't. And what that's going to create is hesitation in you. You soften your language. Like, listen up. If you've ever felt this way, I just want you to know this is okay and normal. But if you're with a client and you're presenting numbers, do you soften your language? Do you maybe cave just a little when clients push? Oh, well, I'm sure we could find something cheaper. Or do you second guess what you've given them? And that's not because you're inexperienced, but because your numbers maybe aren't fully systematized yet. Here's where I want to shift your thinking. Because I think a lot of designers understand that budget's important, but they misunderstand when the budgeting actually happens. The beginning. At the beginning, clients want a range. They want to have an idea. They want a ballpark. They want to know, are we in the right ballpark? And that's it. They're not expecting a fully built out line by line, highly detailed budget before they hire you. And to be honest, if you give them that before they've even hired you, A, you're putting in way too much time, and B, you're shooting yourself in the foot because you don't actually know yet, because you haven't designed it yet. And that leads to a whole slew of other challenges later on in the project. So at that early stage, your job is not to build a budget that's detailed yet. Your job is to guide your client. So it's saying stuff like, based on the projects that we've completed in the past, a living room like yours typically falls between this and that. Or the most recent kitchen that we did was in a condo, it was a similar size, and it was this all in. These are the conversations I want you to have early with your clients. You pull from your experience, absolutely. And then you're adjusting for things like inflation, scope, size, level of finish. And you can tell them that. As long as you're giving them enough to understand the investment overall. And you're not putting in the full work. Stop overworking and over-delivering when you don't have the job yet. And stop working your butt off for a budget that's just not enough. And this is where I see designers overextend. Spending hours. Hey, I have done this too. So if this is you, please do not sweat it. But spending hours building out detailed budgets, refining your numbers, second guessing, Also, maybe trying to prove value, feeling like you need to explain or over-explain why the number you have for the sofa is the number. That is not where your energy should go, because the real work of building a sophisticated budget happens after they've hired you. And I know some of you listening will not agree with me. That's fine. Keep doing it your way. In my experience, once a client signs on, that's when the real work begins. I'm not putting in hours and hours to quote the job, to not get the job, or to spend then hours negotiating back and forth with budget and price. And so once they've hired you, now the project is real. Now it's specific. Now it's layered with nuances. You know more detail. There's trust built in. They're committed. You're committed. And you're not taking your time away from other paying clients. You're investing time in someone who you know is with you for the long haul. And this is where you move from like general ranges to more informed project-specific numbers. So yes, you're still going to pull from your past experience, but now you're refining. You're asking, what does this space actually need, right? Say you're decorating. How many pieces of furniture are in this living room? Is it a sectional? Is it a sofa and a love seat? Is it a bunch of chairs? That's going to affect the price. Also, what level are we designing at? Are we talking, retail purchases like Crate and Barrel? Or are we going to go for marble tile or a custom something, right? And then what are the priorities of the client? And most importantly, you are validating your assumptions, because when you first meet someone, you don't fully know. Let's talk about trade day. So this is where something like trade day becomes essential. Trade day is something that I teach designers inside my program designers room, because it's a very powerful way to get yourself on the same page with your clients and your trades. It's not just about kicking off the project. Yes, that's also what you do in it, but it's about grounding your ideas in reality. You bring in your trades, you walk through the space together, you review feasibility of some initial ideas, you're taking detailed measurements, you're photographing everything, you're getting real input from the people who are actually going to be executing the work. And this is where your budget will sharpen, because now you're not estimating in isolation back in your home office. You are building a budget based on real constraints, real conditions, real pricing, and real timelines. And that is what's going to make it more sophisticated. The beginning of your project, it's not about design. Sure, it's about ideas, creative visualization, conceptualization, but really it's also based on research. And I think a lot of designers miss this step. So if you're gathering information from every single angle, the space, the trades, the vendors, the materials, the timeline, you are pressure testing your ideas. You are pulling data from different sources. And this is something that's really important that as a creative, we often overlook, because we just want to get to picking all the pretty things. But then we get stuck in these frustrating situations with clients where it feels like there's never ending revisions or they can't make a decision. This, getting clear on the numbers early and spending the time to really flush out a good, strong budget is going to help eliminate that down the road with a project. You're going to help yourself identify gaps early on, and you're building a budget that reflects reality, not just intention. Let me tell you a story. In the early years of running my design firm, I thought I was doing a pretty good job. We had our process. We were following my signature 7-step process. That's the one I teach designers inside of Designer's Room. That is the foundation and the cornerstone of your business, is having a process so you can have predictable delivery for your clients. However, the budgeting side, that pricing side, was completely unpredictable for me. Like, I thought I was doing a budget, and I'd learned from a coach, okay, put everything in, and I did, I thought. But then what happened was the client signed on and we got moving, and I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't include, table lamps. I'm embarrassed to say this, guys. I did not. I don't know. I just was like moving at full speed. I had lots of projects on the go. I was overwhelmed. I was just trying to push through. I didn't include hardware. I didn't include certain accent lighting. I don't know. There was like so many little things that were not in my original budget. And the client at the end, because I kept having to go back to them and say, okay, well, this is going to be extra. Like, this wasn't included. They were so frustrated with me because they never trusted me. They stopped trusting me because I told them this was everything, but then it was like, actually, it's not everything. So they were always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that, you know what it did? And you guys have heard me talk about my lemon job. This example I'm sharing is from my lemon job. I've got lots of other budget examples from other jobs that were not lemons, that were still not done perfectly. But this is that lemon job where that trust eroded across the entire project. So it was no longer just about money. It was about my design decisions. Well, I don't know if that lamp's going to be there because I wasn't really organized. I was not as professional as I needed to be for that level of client. And that is something that when you can get ahead of that and you really know your numbers, it will help to build trust with your client. And that's that same client that sat me down at the end and said, we did not enjoy the process of working with you. You were over budget. You know, we told us one thing. It was actually another. Don't do lemon job, Rebecca. Okay, let's talk about this more sophisticated budget. So here's the other piece that matters just as much. What you do outside of your projects, because your ability to budget well doesn't just come from the projects themselves. It comes from how often you're exposing yourself to the industry. So going to places like High Point Market, attending showrooms, lunch and learns, going in person to various showrooms, going or having vendor presentations. Maybe they can come to you, going to them, attending industry events. Not just to look and get inspired, but also to learn. You need to learn the value of the items you are putting forward. It's something I learned when I worked in the restaurant industry, when I was a server at Earl's Restaurant in Vancouver. And I was taught this concept, which was new to me at the time. I was in my late 20s. I'd never heard of this. It was called romancing. And they taught us how to romance the food. And romancing, and I don't know if this is a term that exists in the world. I've never really looked it up since, but this was something that Earl's taught me, which is brilliant. I still think about it to this day. Romancing is how you describe the item you are trying to sell. So perhaps it's the pasta special. And romancing means telling the story. Well, this pasta was homemade by the Italian nonna who lives in blah, blah, blah. And then this tomato sauce is made with San Marzano tomatoes that come directly from Italy. That's romancing. Essentially, you're adding value. You're telling a bit of a story. You're not going to do that with everything, but perhaps you found this incredible clay tile that comes from California and it's hand painted, and tell that story so they see the value. But you don't know those stories if you are not building your knowledge base. So you need to build your knowledge base. You are expected to be the expert in a lot of things. I know, it can be so annoying. I'm like, how am I expected to be the expert in electrical and know code and all the requirements, plus be the expert in the finish and the lighting and how is it made and the plumbing, and is it made with plastic parts? Is it made with brass? Like, we need to know a lot of things. You got to lean on your trades for a lot of these things too. However, the more we learn, the more valuable we are to our clients. So, premium clients. Okay. I want to say something here because this comes up once you start attracting better clients. And just because a client has a larger budget does not mean that budgeting matters less. And some of you already know this. You've had clients that you're like, I don't understand. They have so much money. Why are they nitpicking? Why are they being so difficult, right? Sometimes the more money that's involved, the more it matters. And I learned this the hard way. I had a beautiful opportunity to design a condo for a young family. And I was working really hard with a relatively large decorating budget. I think the decorating budget was, I don't know what it was. It was like 150, I think, for the small space that we were doing. And we got to the presentation, and it was the night before the presentation. And I'm like working with my team. We're staying up late. We're pulling all the quotes. We're putting it into the budget or into the proposal because we hadn't really done a proper budget. And we were like 100,000 over the budget. I was like, holy F, what are we going to do? We presented because we had no time. But guess what happened? The client was obviously disappointed. And then when we started to pull back and we said, okay, well, we can reselect. We have backups for this, backups for that. Nothing felt as good or looked as good as what we showed them. It's like showing someone champagne or giving them a taste of champagne and then giving them a glass of Prosecco. I'm sorry, it's not the same thing. And so, yikes, Did I learn the hard way? Just because they probably could afford it did not mean that they wanted to spend it. This is why getting clear on your budget with your clients early really matters, so that when you go to select, you know what you're working with. Okay. And even though the client ended up working with us to the end, I can tell you, I felt a shift again in their level of trust. And what happened was I felt kind of icky at the end. The space looked good, but every time I would go and have to make a decision about something, all I could think about was the money. If I had only set myself up for success by getting really clear on a really healthy, customized budget for them before I started designing, after trade day, before I actually started running around selecting everything, then that could have made a world of difference. This is exactly the type of refinement that designers who are a few years in need. When you first start, you are just really winging it, right? You're doing your best to get things sorted. But once you start to know, okay, this is how I run a project, I'm getting clients, we need you to get squeaky tight. Is that even an expression? I'm like squeaky clean. Doesn't apply. Sorry, guys. Woo! Is to learn the best and most efficient way to put together a healthy budget, or you can call it an investment. What is the investment to your client? So that you're not shooting yourself in the foot, so that there is money left over at the end. That's one of the things that I teach inside Designers Room, is I teach designers how to be in a position where at the very end of the project, you're actually writing a client a check for a little bit of money because you have more than you need. And that leaves the best taste in the mouth for that client. Who doesn't want to get money back at the end of the project? So this is the level of refinement that we focus on inside Designers Room, because once you've built some experience, it's not about learning how to run a project as much anymore. And yes, there are always nuances, and that's where your process matters. But it's really about learning how to run a budget, how to build it and tighten it so that you're setting yourself up for success. You want to understand where to estimate, where to validate, and how to build a budget that actually holds, right? It's pricing, it's budgeting, it's process. They all work together. So if your budgets have been feeling slightly off, or you struggle with this, it might not be just your numbers. It might just be your timing of when you're presenting it to your client. Maybe you're not giving ranges before they hire you. Are you having budget conversations in your discovery call? That's something I feel very strongly about. And then are you validating numbers with trades, or are you just going off of a past project? That's also important, because inflation happens. Things change. Spaces are not the same. No project is the same, right? No two projects look alike. And that's how you're going to move away from guessing to leading. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are looking for deeper support on building out client budgets, I got you covered inside Designers Room. If you want to find out more, you can attend one of our free workshops where I'll walk you through the importance of having 4 pillars of predictability in your business. Pricing is one of them. And that's something that we can help you with inside the program. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will see you soon.